Let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
welcome to the Rooted Remedies podcast. Meliors, thank you. Um, just in case there aren't people who know you, let me know, give us a little bit of your background, how you came to writing your first book and now your second book.
Yeah. So I'm Meliors Simms and I'm a natural oral health coach. I call myself the holistic tooth fairy. And I got into this work not from a background in dentistry or even health, but because I had really terrible teeth for most of my adult life. Just an endless cycle of going to the dentist in crisis and having very unpleasant dental work done in my mouth where I just was trusting dentists, and often it wasn't the right thing and it didn't work out that well for me. And finally, um, about 12 or 13 years ago, maybe more now, I sort of had an epiphany when I was facing down what would have been my seventh root canal. And I just thought, why? I'm doing everything that the dentist said I should do, and yet here I am just getting these terrible, terrible invasive treatments. There must be another way. And that's when I started looking into what I now affectionately call alt oral, the alternative approaches to oral health. And gosh, it just worked really quickly. I never needed that seventh root canal, and stopped needing fillings every time I go to the dentist. And it was so inspiring. It was such a transformational experience that I started just researching and learning everything I could about what I call alt oral. And then people started asking me for advice because I was sharing, the amazing outcomes I was getting. And then I thought, maybe I can help people in a more kind of formal and structured way. And within 3 months of starting my business as a little side gig online, I was able to quit my day job and do this full time for the last 7 years because people were really eager to learn more about how they could take care of their teeth.
It's
Mm.
evidently very rewarding. Like you can see it in your testimonies. Obviously, I was on your website and reading your book. It's a quick turnaround in terms of time that you put into it and care that you put into your mouth. It's kind of amazing how quickly they respond. So that
Yeah.
brings me to your first book. So it all came together kind of miraculously, it seems.
Yeah, so I hadn't really thought a lot about metaphysical influences on oral health before I started seeing clients, paying clients. And but immediately, almost the very first person that came to see me was asking me about tooth meridians. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to get up to speed really fast. Obviously, I knew what meridians were, and I had a background of kind of thinking about the metaphysical in relation to my general health, but like most people, I hadn't thought of applying it to my oral health, despite that being like the main problem area that I was facing with my health. So I really have learned as much from working with clients as I've been able to learn from doing more kind of formal book learning research, because there's so little has been written about this, certainly in the English language. But yet that's become kind of my area of speciality because there's that big gap of knowledge.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, a couple of years ago, I decided to write the book that is now The Secret Lives of Teeth, Understanding Emotional Influences on Oral Health. And I published it. Oh, actually, it's a year ago today. We are speaking on the 1 year anniversary of publishing my book. So,
Wonderful.
um, how perfect timing is that? Yeah, and it's been really well received, and seems to be building in its reach as I think word of mouth is getting it out into the world. Yeah.
Yeah, as a mom, in my case particularly, I was looking for answers outside of the convention, outside of, um, I guess you could call it propaganda, but I would say, yeah, just the conventional squared thinking of we do this way, and I didn't want that. I knew that path wasn't for me. So your book definitely filled a gap that Holistic dentistry does have it. It does offer it. There are biological dentists here in the US that practice incredible, they do incredible work and they almost give you your child back. My nephew is a completely different man now.
Mm,
But your book definitely answered questions for me that I was like, oh, amazing, you know? So I would say what from your perspective would you call wisdom of the mouth? You know, for a parent that hears that for the first time or, you know,
mm.
people who are kind of into alternative things, but when they hear that phrase, like what's the hook? Like how can we get them to see that?
Yeah. I think those of us who struggle with problems with, particularly chronic problems with our mouths or have children or other loved ones who are struggling with really serious teeth and gum issues, the question is why? And dentists and periodontists are often, reasonably good at giving us relief from symptoms, but they're not the explanations that they offer are not always very satisfactory. And that's where having this much broader perspective that takes in emotional, psychological, ancestral, environmental, and energetic influences and builds that unique picture. And then the relief of going, oh, yes, that's why it's to do with this that happened in my childhood or this that happened to my grandmother. And that's, it's not like understanding that gives you an instant resolution to the actual physical problems, but it enables a kind of a mind shift that really does allow healing strategies, whether they are mainstream dental interventions or whether they are more holistic and integrated approaches, to work more effectively when you have that understanding of why everything kind of is more aligned and works more smoothly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm curious on your perspective. I have a theory as to why you could have expressions from your past. Um, and a little bit, I think it's just each generation is meant to improve as a species or as a, you know, civilization. And I'm curious what your take would be, why my child would express my great grandmother's dentition or and many other things, of course. It's not just the teeth, right? But
Mm, mm.
yeah, what would be for you? Just curious what you think of that. Why would that?
Yeah. So um the development of our teeth is really closely timed with the development of our brain in utero. And so the particular neurological links to different parts of the brain link to different individual teeth. So that's why you'll see cavities appear in certain parts of the mouth or gum recession in certain parts of the mouth, in reflecting particular emotional patterns or social dynamics or life trauma experiences. How it gets passed down through the generations is that actually the tooth germs, they're called, they're like the seed of the tooth starts to develop in the ovary, in the egg inside the ovary of the embryo inside the womb.
Mm,
So you, when your mother was inside her mother's womb, your teeth germ was, the seed was planted at that point. So there's a physical connection between the grandmother, the mother, and you, your teeth.
lovely.
Yeah. And so the
Yeah.
emotional context of your grandmother's life up to the point of the pregnancy with your mother, and particularly her emotional state during the pregnancy, is sort of imprints on that tooth germ and creates the context in which that tooth germ develops into first the baby teeth and then the adult teeth. Yeah.
So I'm curious, as a mother, I have now a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. What I mean, aside, what occurs to me in hearing you and in reading your book, I was like, well, the best you can do while you're pregnant is to kind of obviously procure the best environment for yourself in terms of reducing stress, um, eating well, all of those things. Is there a way to kind of ameliorate the imprint? Is there a way to kind of control that, or is it just you hope for the best, eat as best as you can, and then create that loving environment so that the fullest extent, in terms of potential, in the positive way, can be expressed?
Yeah, I think, you can only do your best. That's all we can do is our best. And our best is so influenced by factors that are often very much outside of our control. And that DNA inheritance gets reinforced by unconscious patterns and conditioning that we learned when in the families that we grew up in. So there's not just the physical family's influence, but and there could be two entirely different families, if you're
Oh, yes.
adopted or otherwise separated. So you could have one set of DNA influences and one set of kind of social and cultural influences, and they interact and combine. And then there's the uniqueness of your personality and your parents' personalities. And many of us, I think, are trying to not repeat those social and cultural patterns that we were raised with
It's
and
seven
to do
generations worth.
better. Yeah.
There's a
And
lot.
so,
There's a lot.
yeah, I mean, this perspective should never, ever be used to guilt feel guilty about what you've done, or to blame your parents or your grandparents. But what it does do is give you insights about what you can address and do differently. And so as parents of young children who've got this inheritance or have got these inexplicable teeth problems. And so this is something that I've observed over and over again in my coaching, is that even children who were born from pregnancies that were exquisite in their care and their avoidance of stress and their only the best food and their everything done right, and then a beautiful gentle birth, and then really nurturing, careful, good parenting and the right foods and everything, and still sometimes the baby's teeth emerge out of the gums in really bad shape. And that question of why,
Mm.
well, when you understand that, then you don't have to beat yourself up so hard. Yeah.
I live in amazement every day with particularly my daughter, because she's older. She is the
Mm.
spitting image of my mother-in-law. I mean,
Ah,
physically, it's impressive. I mean, down to her sassiness and her personality. So yeah, I think that's incredible. I'm amazed
yeah.
by that literally every day. How she looks over at me. I'm like, that's my mother-in-law. And it's a good thing. I'm very happy. I'm blessed to say that.
Yeah. Nice.
I'm curious then, yeah, let's go where, how would I say this? How did our ancestors get us here? In the sense of they didn't have access to pharma or pharmaceutical products. They didn't have access to the same cutting edge, supposedly dentistry that exists now. Um, how did they manage, and why do you feel? I feel like there's a compounding effect of something that I have yet to put my finger on. I think it's food, but I don't think it's just that.
Yeah,
Um,
so food plays a big role, and it seems to really go back to the agricultural revolution. So, about 30,000 years ago. So many generations. Hunter-gatherers tend to have really good teeth. And that's, of course, the work of Weston A. Price
Mhm.
really showed us that connection. And so the introduction of a grain-based diet seems to have done a lot to undermine the oral microbiome and the shape of our jaws and the consequences in terms of cavities and decay and poor oral health through the generations. and then the Industrial Revolution and the introduction of sugar kind of was the icing on the cake, so to speak. The sweet icing on the cake of grains. And then I think people's teeth, who were eating those kind of diets really started to take the brunt. Now, what happens generationally, because you can turn around that dietary stuff relatively within a generation,
Mm,
but
yeah.
what happens is that when there's emotional trauma that is particularly tied with um, food experiences. So famine is a big one where people don't have access to enough nutrients, and there's a strong emotional component. And so many of my generation, grandparents, and your generation, probably great grandparents, experienced wars and famine and forced migration, and of course that's still going on now for
Of
millions of
course, of
people.
course.
And now, of course, we've got the layering in of all the other disruptions to do with the climate change and so on. But when there's those emotional traumas of those environmental, social, political, cultural circumstances, and played out through what you can and can't eat, and the conversation that's going on while you're eating, and what all of that, then it kind of gets laid into the DNA, so it becomes part of the DNA when those traumas are tied to food, and so the emotion and the trauma are laid in with the nutrition or lack of it
Yeah.
as you're growing, and then that's passed on through the generations. So
So
yeah, so a lot of the ancestral work I do with clients is like, where's the where's the trauma in the past, and was there a component that, like, even a relatively not forced migration, like I migrated once in utero and then once again when I was 3, and then 3 times since as a young person and adult. Um, uh, and those were not, I wasn't a refugee. It wasn't particularly traumatic, but it was very disruptive. So you have that change in diet of just going to a new place, maybe not understanding how to have conversations around food and so on, and then it gets laid in the mouth.
mm,
Yeah.
crazy. Um, I personally try not to be, I don't know how it is in New Zealand clearly, and I find that especially the registered dental hygienist here and again, the convention it's all about the germs and the germs and the germs and the germs.
Huh.
And they've always existed, So for me, I don't run around essential oils after every time I eat. I feel like there's a way to be practical about what's going on. And then
Yes.
there's a way, and it's very easy to go crazy and just overtreat. And now there's RDHs saying that you should go in every 2 to 3 months to get a cleaning if that's how your dentition deals with the environmental factors. So I'm curious on your take as a holistic coach, because if you don't change the way you eat, clearly it's a part of it. Maybe not the totality of it. You're gonna
Mm,
keep getting the same things show up in your mouth.
mm,
Be excessive tartar buildup, or whether it be, the infections in your gum, or recession, or just inflammation. Yeah, what is your perspective on that? Because overdoing it also doesn't work, because you don't solve the issues at hand that's creating that in the first place.
yeah. Well, my first tip to offer anyone, whether you're an adult or a child, is try and get in the habit of rinsing your mouth after you eat anything, snacks included, and any drink that has got sugar or carbs in it. Anyhow, you want to rinse the food residue out of your mouth straight away, because the food residue, that you're not the only person eating the food that you're eating, well, not the only person, but there's these bacterial communities in your mouth, and the particular bacteria that love to eat sugar and carbs in particular are the same bacteria that cause tooth decay and gum disease. So if you minimize those types of bacteria exposure to the food that will cause them to multiply and dominate in the mouth, then they don't stand up a chance. They're still living there, but they're part of a really diverse oral microbiome. Most of us have about 50 different types of oral bacteria in our mouth out of a choice of about 500, 800 worldwide. And it's a unique kind of lineup, very heavily influenced by our mother's oral microbiome, but unique to us. But it gets out of balance, and one of the ways it can get out of balance is if we eat a lot of sugar and carbs, and those types of bacteria gain dominance in our mouth. So best habit to get into is rinse. So plain water and go, and then just swallow it, because it's just food that you were eating anyway. You don't have to spit it out. Now you can rinse with salt water, and then you would want to spit it out. You can rinse with a baking soda solution, and that helps to, alkalize the environment in your mouth. That's a good one if you've got very acidic mouth. You can rinse with like a herbal rinse. So find what your child prefers, find what you prefer, and just get in the habit of rinsing with something. What you don't want to do is jump in there and brush your teeth straight after eating, because those foods soften the enamel for about 30 minutes. So if you brush straight away, you can scratch the enamel. There's more problems. And I don't recommend the widespread use of daily use of most essential oils in the mouth, because it's too harsh for the gums.
It is a concentrated amount of plant material. I see both sides. So I do use essential oils, and I think for an acute issue, it's where I would use it. And then maybe for
Yeah.
daily use, something a little more
Yeah, you want to be very gentle with daily use, and an acute remedy for an acute problem. And then if you're doing that kind of remedy in your mouth, you want to like really target it to where the problem is, and not be doing like a swish with an essential oil. I've seen too many people with burned gums
Oh,
from
really?
doing that. Yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
yeah. Yeah, it burns the gum. So, put a bit of diluted whatever, clove oil for pain or something, on a Q-tip or something else, a pixter, or on your floss, and put it exactly where it's needed. That's the way to use it in an acute situation.
Do you tend to recommend silk threads over any of the poly plastic stuff? I just found I didn't know today that the Dr. Tongues that I really like is all plastic. And I was like, oh, I thought it was
Yeah, the
fine.
risk with those plastic coated flosses is that they shed microplastics, and there's been some research done um, that those microplastics can accumulate in the gum line and contribute to gum recession and destabling the whole oral microbiome. So I do recommend silk or bamboo floss. You can get some flosses that have been waxed with Candelia, which is actually a wax as opposed to plastic. But you
Okay.
have to look for all of these. If you're just buying the Oral-B or whatever in a
Yeah.
plastic box at the supermarket, you're going to get microplastics in your gums. Mm.
What are some metaphysical approaches that you like to use with children, specifically,
Mm.
especially younger? I feel like a teenager is obviously they're hormonal, but they're easier to talk to if you've taken the time as a child and developed that relationship. So yeah, how would you handle a 3-year-old with a cavity or something like
Yeah. So one of the things I would recommend is get in the habit of saying a blessing on the food that
that?
they eat, that you as family eat before you eat. And pause, breathe, and say something, that whatever fits in with your worldview and theology, whether it's a religious prayer or it's just an acknowledgement of the earth that produced the food, or thanking the animals and the plants, or something that brings a consciousness, an awareness of this. This is a special thing. This is nutrition, and the slowing down and the taking a breath is really important to bring your body into alignment with what you're about to eat, that supports the oral microbiome and energetically creates a kind of a positive manifestation around the food. Yeah. So before you eat, say some kind of blessing, and after you eat, do a swish. And that you can do that at any age. So
I carry a little reusable jar of saline solution in my purse at all times. And she knows.
yeah,
She knows.
yeah, perfect. That's
Um,
the food.
what
Mm.
would be, what is your view on orthodontics and braces for that older kid? I know there's a lot, there's just, because there's so many people in the world, I think there's just so many lines of thought in terms of keeping the wisdom teeth, extracting them, orthodontics. My oldest niece she'll be 17 or 18 in June. Terrible experience with orthodontics. They made her mouth worse. And it was expensive, as orthodontics traditionally are. And my sister found a biological dentist here in Florida that has kind of really improved the situation for the kids. But I'm like, well, now what does that mean? Do you not do orthodontics, or do you work with someone? How do you
Mm.
look for someone who's really trained?
Yeah. So what I would suggest is start when they're younger than most orthodontists will, and work on non-invasive, like myofunctional type of strategies, like oral posture, making sure that your child is not mouth breathing, that they've got a good tongue position, that you can do a lot while they're still growing to make sure that the jaw is broadened. And there's um myomunchie type of devices that can help with that. Making sure your child has the opportunity to chew hard, chewy food is really important for the development of teeth. And of course, breastfeeding also is very important for the development of teeth. So doing that for as long as you can. But and then I think that as a society, we need to be a little more relaxed about how straight we expect teeth to be. Like, as long as the bite is functional, and you can eat easily, it's not uncomfortable, you can breathe with your lips closed, you can speak clearly, then that should be good enough. But we are presented with this very unnatural beauty standard of straight, white, perfect Hollywood smile that is unrealistic for everyone. And the achieving of it does long-term damage for a lot of people. One of my bugbears is that orthodontists often don't tell at the beginning that you're going to need it to wear a retainer for the rest of your life to actually keep those teeth in place. So you go through the months or years of the braces and all of that expense and drama, and then hello, you've got to keep wearing a retainer forever. Otherwise, it'll all just revert. And yeah, it seems to me a very dishonest way of going about the
Yeah, because
business.
orthodontics isn't palate expansion. And so I thought, kids who had braces, they were set for life because, you had straight, healthy teeth, you had room for all of your teeth. And so, yeah, that's what's going on now with my niece. Her wisdom teeth
No.
are coming in, and the orthodontics made it problematic. So, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and the really common practice of pulling out premolars to
Mhm.
make more room for the other teeth. So if you do that palate expansion and jaw exercise work with kids while they're sort of 7 years, 7 to 10, then they might not need any orthodontic braces when they're 13, 14. And if they do choose to go down that road, they shouldn't need to have any teeth pulled out. So, yeah,
Mm.
that pulling out of the premolars, which are metaphysically speaking, the teeth that really relate to identity and establishing yourself as an independent adult. And so when we go to 13 and 14-year-olds who are in the developmental stage of developing an individual identity and pull out the teeth that do that, we set them up for really a hard time to know what it is that they want and need to have good boundaries around their bodies, to not be people pleasing. I think a lot of the issues that we see with younger generations that have been kind of, particularly in America, very widespread extraction of these teeth for orthodontic purposes. And they do seem to have these challenges around knowing where their boundaries are and their identity is. And it's
Mm.
hard
Yeah.
because it's been done physically. The energetic residue remains. Mm.
So, I would say, yeah, what is your latest project? I know you're going to print your second book.
Yes, it's coming out this month. It's called Calm and Confident in the Dental Chair, an adult workbook to relieve dental anxiety. So it's probably good for teens as well. And there's definitely some of the strategies you could use with younger children, but I am aiming it squarely at adults. There's quite a few books for dental anxiety in children already on the market, and there's almost nothing for adults. And yeah, I myself have reached a point with dental anxiety in the past where I was having panic attacks, even under general anesthetic. I was so traumatized by my difficult dental history. So, yeah, I tried to write it as a workbook so that going through the book would be like having a coaching session with me,
Mhm.
and to replicate that experience in a do-it-yourself format. So I'm pretty excited to put it out in the world. It's a bit different from my other book, which is much more of a reference book, and it's quite information dense. The workbook for dental anxiety is like a set of practices and exercises that you can do to prepare, and then tips to apply on the day when you're in the dental chair, everything from managing a gag reflex to how to talk to the dentist so they will listen and you can understand what they say, to finding a dentist that you feel comfortable working with, to working through your own dental history if that was difficult and traumatic. So, yeah, it's full spectrum of dental anxiety approaches.
And it's part of a series. Am I correct?
Yeah, so my next workbook is going to be on tooth extraction for people that need to have a tooth extraction, whether that's a pretty standard and um, uh, wisdom tooth extraction, or a failed root canal, or an abscess or some other traumatic extraction.
You've
All the
set your
ins and outs
mission
of
for
doing that.
yourself. You
Yeah,
set yourself
yeah,
up. So you finish, I mean, you go through the stress of writing the book and publish it, and then you jump again and do it all over again.
oh yes, but I've got so much I want to say. There's
Yes.
going to be probably at least 6, maybe 10 books
Wow.
lined up and ready and waiting to be birthed.
Well, it's
Yeah.
beautiful for me to read your book, number one, and pull it out. I pull it out as a party trick, by the way. I'm like, hey, what, where?
That's what I hoped.
Yeah, and but it's it's huge because conventional dentistry, my hope is that they'll align with the biological people and be like, we can rise to the occasion and serve people in the way that they want to be served. And I feel there's a few steps in between that. And you definitely, yeah, you provide those steps. So that's
Yeah, it's my hope that this book helps to fuel a movement of patient demand or patient expectations that can start to influence change in mainstream dentistry, because it's a business. And if we, as the people that pay them, go in with really clear intentions and expectations and clear boundaries about what we don't want to happen, then they'll have to respond to us. So I really want to empower people to have better experiences at the dentist when they do need to go. Dentists are important. We
Yeah.
need them, some of us more than others, but there's been some very interesting research just published this week, actually, about overdiagnosis and excessive treatment. And that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So it's actually in the mainstream discourse right now, this problem with the dental profession. And so how do we navigate that as patients and get the care that we need and the care that we want, and not the excess of an unnecessary root canal or an unnecessary orthodontic extraction and
Yeah.
all the rest of it. So,
I
yeah.
spoke with a woman not too long ago who said, even the simple suggestion of removing or reducing screen exposure, EMF exposure, and just it was in the context of a child, give that child 2 to 3 months of eliminating the stressors, you'd be surprised what could change.
Mm,
I thought that was
mm,
incredible. And that's for a dentist to go that far and say, let's just try something non-invasive for 3 months is
mm.
it's a it's utopic, and it would serve people way more than we're serving now. So I think it'd be an ideal approach. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, particularly when people can do that early before they've kind of reached
Exactly.
a
Yes.
crisis point, because it is very hard to turn things around sufficiently when you kind of cross a line to, the decay gets down into the dentin,
Mhm.
or the gums, the gum disease extends into the jawbone. When things are just starting out, those are like the little whispers of the psyche saying, hey, this issue needs to be addressed, speaking through the body. And then if we can address it, then it never needs to develop into these severe physical symptoms. But mostly people don't start looking for solutions until things are really bad. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, Meliors, thank you so much. Your
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll put the links, but just in case, let people know how to get a hold of you. I know you're the Holistic Tooth Fairy.
Yes, and that's my website. So holistic with an H, holistictoothfairy.com, and you'll find links to my books, a whole lot of free resources, lots and lots of articles and things that you can download. And also, I'm taking coaching clients, so you can contact me through the website as well.
Wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah,
your testimony is great. Yeah.
thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good luck. Good
bye.
luck. Bye.